Picture this, a typical Sunday cookout, right? Like the ones we all grew up with. Kids are running around. Yeah, somebody's getting their hair cut in the front yard. Burgers are on the grill. It's like just that perfect spring evening. Then, boom, out of nowhere. Gunshots. People are running, diving for cover. Just total chaos. And sadly, this isn't some movie scene. This actually happened back on April 9th, 2017 in Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah, and what really gets me about this case is it's so senseless. It really makes you wonder, about the random nature of violence. And today we're going to dive deep into this unsolved murder. James Walker III, the victim. We're going to be looking at police reports, witness statements, trying to figure out what happened that night.
So this wasn't some crazy party or anything, right? It's just a casual get-together at a guy's house, Antonio Birch. People were hanging out just a normal Sunday. Then around 9:20 p.m., everything changed.
Three guys, hoodies pulled up, hiding their faces, walked up to the house. Some witnesses said they thought they were just, showing up late to the party. But then they pulled out guns and started shooting.
Oh, man. I can't even imagine. Just boom, gunfire erupts, people scattering, diving for cover. Some witnesses said there were like 5 to 10 shots. That's not just someone messing around, you know what I mean?
No, definitely not. And in all that chaos, 31-year-old James Walker, everybody called him Montana, he got caught in the crossfire. He was found near the front porch, multiple gunshot wounds. They couldn't save him.
That's just awful. I read that James, he was an amateur rapper, went by the name Montana YG. It's just, makes you think about the potential he had, the music he could have made if his life wasn't cut short.
Absolutely. It's a tragedy on so many levels. And the detective on the case, Detective Addie Perkins, she had a tough job ahead of her.
I bet. You have a scene like that, people running, scared, and then on top of that, you've got this code of silence, right? People not wanting to talk to the police. I mean, where do you even start?
It's a huge challenge. You're dealing with shock, trauma, and then this, unspoken rule, don't snitch. James's own mother, she even warned Detective Perkins about it, told her it would be really hard to get people to talk.
Wow. So you've got a chaotic scene, no one wanted to talk, and then hours later, it gets even more complicated. This guy, Jamarcus Ricks, shows up at a different hospital, got a gunshot wound to his behind.
Yeah, Ricks claimed he was shot at the party but waited to go to the hospital, said he had some outstanding warrants. I mean, come on, talk about adding fuel to the fire.
So if James wasn't the target, who was? Was this Ricks guy? Or maybe he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, right?
That's what Detective Perkins was trying to figure out. But just like a lot of people in this case, Ricks wasn't talking. Him and the woman who drove him to the hospital, they just clammed up.
It's like everyone had something to hide. And that makes you wonder, did these shooters, did they pick this Cardi on purpose, knowing people might not talk to the cops?
That's a chilling thought, but, it does happen. Criminals, they know that if witnesses are scared to talk, it makes their job a whole lot easier. It makes justice, well, pretty much impossible.
So, about James, we know he had a record, right? Drug possession, weapons charges. But his family says he was turning his life around, that he wasn't involved in anything that would get him killed.
That's what's so sad about this. James's past, it might have made him look suspicious, but the police, they didn't have anything concrete tying his past to the shooting. It makes you wonder if the shooters used that to their advantage, knowing it could muddy the waters.
So we're back, and we're trying to make sense of this whole James Walker case. A young man killed at a barbecue, and Detective Perkins, she's facing all these roadblocks.
Yeah, like we were saying, that code of silence, it really can cripple an investigation. You're missing crucial pieces of the puzzle.
Talking about those missing pieces, what did the police actually have to go on? I know they found some shell casings, got some witness statements, but those were, kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
And they were waiting on that ballistics report, right?
Yeah.
So what could they do with all that, or, well, lack of it?
Well, Detective Perkins, she had to start somewhere. She went back, looked into Jin's background, hoping maybe something would pop up, give her a clue about why this happened. Went back and talked to people in the neighborhood, hoping maybe someone would finally crack, tell her something. And of course, she was waiting on those ballistics results, hoping for a break.
And did those results, did they help at all? It just seems like every time they got a little bit of hope in this case, it just, poof, disappeared.
This time, the report actually did give them something to work with. It backed up what some of the witnesses were saying. They found 3 different types of bullets, which meant, 3 shooters. And get this, the guns, they had been used before in other crimes in Wichita. So it felt like maybe Detective Perkins finally had a real lead.
But there's always a but with this case, right?
Right. The guns, well, they had changed hands so many times since those other crimes, there was no way to connect them to anyone specific in James's murder. Another dead end.
Man, that's rough. You got to think how hard this was for James's family. Each setback, like another punch to the gut. And then there was that whole thing with those two guys in prison, right?
Yeah.
The ones who claimed they knew something.
Yeah, those jailhouse informants. You also got to be careful with those, you know? They dangled this little bit of hope, like maybe they've got that missing puzzle piece, but then more often than not, it's just a letdown.
And that's exactly what happened here. Their stories, they just didn't add up. They kept changing their story. It was obvious they were just trying to get a lighter sentence, not really help James get justice.
It's a sad truth. Some people will use a tragedy like this to try and help themselves, you know? It's just adding salt to the wound for the victims and their families.
So 2018 rolls around, a year after the shooting, and the case goes cold. No new leads, no arrests, no justice for James. So what happens next? Do the investigators, do they just give up at that point?
Not exactly. They might not be actively working the case like before, but it doesn't mean they've forgotten about it. In James's case, a few things happened after that. In 2022, the Wichita police, they held a press conference, tried to bring the case back into the spotlight, asked for anyone with info to come forward. Anything.
And didn't they, I think I read about this, didn't they release a deck of cards with like cold cases from all over Kansas? Was James on one of those cards? What was the point of that?
He was the king of clubs. Interesting idea, right? They figured if they got these cards into prisons, jails, maybe someone would see James's face and remember something. You know, maybe a cellmate overheard something, or a visitor let something slip, something to trigger their memory, give the police that piece of the puzzle they need.
It's a long shot, but hey, you never know. Something small like that could crack the case wide open. But even if it doesn't lead to an arrest right away, keeping James's name out there, it shows his family that he hasn't been forgotten, that people are still fighting for justice for him.
Yeah, and that's huge for families like James's, not knowing why it happened, why he was taken from them. It adds another layer of pain on top of everything else.
So we're back. And we've been digging into this James Walker case, this unsolved murder that's left his family without answers, and a community struggling with what they know but aren't saying.
Yeah, it's a story that really highlights, how hard it can be to get justice, how powerful fear can be, and how devastating silence can be in these situations.
We keep talking about this code of silence, but I keep thinking, what would it take to actually break it? What would make someone risk, maybe getting hurt or going against like their whole community to come forward with information?
It's the million-dollar question with these unsolved cases, isn't it? And it's tough. There's no easy answer. It's this mix of, what motivates people, the community they live in, and the whole system. It's complicated.
We talked about being afraid of getting hurt, especially if gangs are involved. But then there's also this distrust of the police, right? People might think, no one's going to listen to me anyway. Or maybe they've had bad experiences with cops before, so they just don't want to get involved.
Absolutely. Those experiences, they matter. And a lot of times that distrust, it comes from years of unfair treatment. Communities that have been targeted by the police or they've seen police do bad things and get away with it. It's understandable why they wouldn't trust them.
So how do we fix that? How do we make it so people feel safe coming forward, knowing that someone will listen and that justice will be done?
It's going to take a big change. We have to change the whole relationship between the police and the community. We need more trust, more honesty from the police, and they need to be held accountable when they do wrong. And they got to work with the community, not against them. Everyone needs to be working together.
Right. It can't be us versus them. We all want the same thing, safer communities.
Exactly. To solve cases like James's, everyone needs to be on board. We got to understand that staying silent only helps the bad guys. But when people speak up, it empowers the community to take back their safety and make sure the people who did wrong are punished.
This case also makes you think about gun violence as a whole,
Yeah.
It's a tough issue, no easy solutions, but we can't just ignore it anymore.
No, we can't. We need to have real conversations about why this is happening, about how easy it is to get guns, about mental health, poverty, all of it. We need to do things that actually work, like, common sense gun laws, programs to stop violence in communities, better mental health care.
It's a lot, but we owe it to James, to his family, to everyone affected by gun violence. We can't let fear win. We got to keep fighting for answers, for justice, for a future where these tragedies don't happen so much.
And if you take away one thing from all this, let it be this. If you know something about a crime, anything, even if you think it's not important, say something. You never know. You might be the one who helps solve the case, brings a family some peace, and make sure the people who did it are held responsible.
Your voice matters. Think about how much good it can do. And if you have any information about James Walker's case, please call Detective Perkins at the Wichita Police Department. The number is 316-268-4379. Or you can email coldcase@wichita.gov. You might be the key to finally closing this case.
Thanks for joining us as we dug into this unsolved case. Even though we don't have all the answers, it shows us how hard it can be to get justice, how much pain these families go through, and how important it is to speak up. We hope this made you think, made you talk about it, maybe even inspired you to do something. Remember, silence doesn't help anyone. Speaking up, even when it's hard, that's how we start to build a world where everyone feels safe and where justice is served. Thanks for listening. I have a